The rain poured heavily that night, soaking through the thin jacket she had bought from a clearance sale months ago. She pulled it tighter around herself, trying to ignore the cold that seeped into her bones. The city lights shimmered in the puddles beneath her feet, a cruel contrast to the darkness she felt inside. She had just finished another long shift at the small cafe near her college campus, her feet aching from standing all day, her mind exhausted from trying to balance work, school, and the growing weight of uncertainty. Her bank account was nearly empty, just enough left to cover rent if she skipped a few meals. It wasn't the first time she had been in this position, but it felt heavier now. The pressure, the doubt, the nagging voice in her head telling her she was running out of time. She had dreamed of making it big, of seeing her face on magazine covers, of proving to herself and the world that she was more than just another struggling student. But right now, all she had was a pile of overdue bills and a dream that felt further away than ever. She glanced at her reflection in a store window as she passed by. Her hair was messy from the rain, her eyes tired, her face pale. This wasn't the version of herself she had imagined. The version in her dreams was confident, successful, admired. But how could she ever get there when she could barely afford to get through the next week? As she reached her tiny apartment, she hesitated at the door, staring at the pile of unopened letters on the floor. More bills. More reminders of everything she lacked. She let out a slow breath and picked them up, forcing herself to stay strong. There had to be a way out of this. She just hadn't found it yet. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. Another rejection email. She closed her eyes for a moment, willing herself not to give up. She had sent out so many applications for internships, modeling gigs, anything that could get her foot in the door. But the response was always the same: not the right fit, not enough experience, not what we're looking for. She refused to let it break her. Instead of dwelling on it, she pulled out her notebook, flipping through the pages filled with ideas, goals, plans she had scribbled late at night when her dreams felt a little closer. She had no connections, no financial backing, no guarantees. But she had talent, determination, and a fire inside her that refused to burn out. That day, she made a decision. She would stop waiting for someone to give her a chance and create one for herself. No matter how impossible it seemed, she would find a way. What she didn't know was that her life was about to change in ways she never expected. And soon, the world would know her name. That morning, she walked out of her apartment with a newfound determination. The world had told her no too many times, but she was done waiting for permission. She had no connections, no financial support, and no clear plan, just an unwavering belief that she was meant for something more. Her first step was figuring out how to put herself out there. She spent hours researching, scrolling through stories of people who had made it from nothing. Some had been discovered online, others had built their own platforms. If no one was going to give her a chance, she would have to create one herself. She started with what little she had: a borrowed phone, an old laptop that overheated every 20 minutes, and a vision. She set up a makeshift studio in the corner of her room, using a sheet as a backdrop. The lighting was terrible, and the first few pictures she took looked nothing like the glossy magazine covers she dreamed of. But she kept going, experimenting, adjusting, trying to figure out what worked. Days turned into weeks, and the rejections kept coming. Every morning, she woke up to emails telling her she wasn't what agencies were looking for. But instead of letting it crush her, she used it as fuel. She started studying the industry, how models posed, how photographers framed their shots, how brands marketed themselves. If she couldn't get in through the front door, she would find another way. She created an account on social media and began posting daily. At first, no one noticed. She had no followers, no engagement, nothing to show for the hours she poured into perfecting her images and captions. But she didn't stop. She kept posting, kept refining her style, kept pushing herself to be better. Then one evening something changed. A well-known fashion blogger shared one of her photos, calling her a fresh face with undeniable talent. Within hours, her inbox was flooded with messages. Brands, photographers, even small agencies, people were suddenly paying attention. But just as things started looking up, reality hit harder than ever. Rent was due, and she was still barely making enough to scrape by. The excitement of the online attention didn't change the fact that she needed money to survive. She picked up extra shifts at the cafe, working late into the night, then waking up early to shoot content before class. Exhaustion weighed on her, but she refused to slow down. Her persistence paid off when she landed her first collaboration. It wasn't much, just a small local boutique, offering her free clothes in exchange for photos. But to her, it was proof that she was moving in the right direction. She poured everything into that shoot, treating it as if it were a major campaign. The boutique loved her work and shared it with their followers, bringing even more attention to her page. But with success came doubt. Some people in her life didn't understand what she was doing. They told her it wasn't a real career, that she should focus on getting a stable job. Even some of her closest friends questioned her choices. The comments online weren't always kind either. Some people criticized her looks, her style, her decision to chase a dream that seemed so far out of reach. There were moments when she almost believed them, when she wondered if she was just fooling herself, if all this effort would ever really pay off. But then she would remember the feeling of possibility, the tiny glimpses of progress, the way her heart raced whenever she saw her work being recognized. That feeling was worth every late night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt. And then came the opportunity that changed everything. A rising designer reached out, offering her a spot in a small but prestigious runway show. It wasn't Paris Fashion Week, but it was a start. It was proof that people were noticing her, that she was no longer just a broke student posting pictures online. She was becoming someone to watch. As she stepped onto that runway for the first time, the lights blinding, the cameras flashing, she knew this was just the beginning. But what she didn't know was that the road ahead would test her in ways she had never imagined. The attention, the pressure, the industry's brutal expectations, it was all about to get more intense than she ever thought possible. And she had to decide just how far she was willing to go to turn her dream into reality. After the runway show, everything seemed to change overnight. The designer posted her pictures, and soon, more brands started reaching out. Small campaigns, test shoots, casting calls. She was finally getting the opportunities she had been chasing. But with every step forward, new challenges appeared. The fashion industry was far more brutal than she had imagined. It wasn't just about looking good in front of the camera. Every casting was a silent competition, every fitting a test of patience. Agencies and brands wanted a certain look, a certain energy. If she didn't fit, she was dismissed without a second thought. At first, she handled the rejections well. She reminded herself that this was part of the journey. But as the weeks passed, she started noticing patterns. Some doors were closed before she even walked through them. She overheard conversations, whispers about needing a different type of model. Some clients liked her look, but wanted her to lose weight, change her hair, wear a different style. The pressure was relentless. No matter how hard she worked, it felt like she was never quite enough. She watched other models with industry connections get booked for campaigns that she had auditioned for. Some of them barely had experience, but they had the right name, the right friends, the right background. She started questioning if talent and hard work were really enough to succeed. One night, she sat alone in her tiny apartment, scrolling through social media. She saw another model, a girl who had started around the same time as her, sign a major contract. She was happy for her, but a part of her couldn't help but feel the weight of her own struggle. She had been working just as hard, pushing herself every day. Why did it feel like she was always one step behind? Determined not to let doubt consume her, she threw herself deeper into her work. She took every opportunity, even the unpaid gigs, just to get her name out there. She networked, introduced herself to photographers, stylists, and makeup artists. She learned the importance of building relationships, of making people remember her name. But in the midst of her climb, an unexpected setback hit. A major campaign she had been counting on suddenly fell through. The brand decided to go in a different direction at the last minute, leaving her without the paycheck she had been relying on. Her rent was due, and she had barely enough to cover it. For the first time in months, she considered quitting. Maybe this wasn't meant for her. Maybe the industry would always favor the connected, the privileged, the ones who didn't have to struggle just to be noticed. She thought about her life before all of this, the security of knowing what came next, the comfort of routine. But then she remembered why she started. She wasn't just doing this for money or fame. She was doing it because she believed in something bigger. She wanted to prove that someone like her, someone who came from nothing, could make it on her own terms. With renewed determination, she made a decision. If the industry wouldn't open doors for her, she would create her own. She started reaching out directly to brands, pitching herself with confidence. She built her social media presence, learning how to market herself beyond traditional modeling. Soon, her efforts paid off. A small but influential brand gave her a chance. They didn't care about the usual industry standards. They wanted authenticity, personality, someone who could connect with real people. She poured everything into the campaign, and when it launched, the response was overwhelming. She had finally carved out a place for herself. But with success came a new set of challenges: jealousy, scrutiny, the pressure to stay relevant. And just when she thought she was finding her footing, an unexpected betrayal threatened to unravel everything she had built. As the campaign gained traction, her face started appearing everywhere: billboards, online ads, magazine spreads. It was everything she had dreamed of, yet it didn't feel as secure as she had imagined. With the growing attention came a wave of criticism, speculation, and rumors. People picked apart her journey, questioning how she had risen so quickly. Some claimed she had connections she wasn't admitting to. Others said she was just a trend, someone who would fade once the industry moved on. She tried to ignore it, focusing on her work. But then, the betrayal came. Someone she had trusted, a close friend from the early days, leaked private messages, twisting her words to make it seem like she had manipulated her way into success. Screenshots circulated online, fueling the narrative that she wasn't as genuine as she seemed. Brands hesitated, some even reconsidered their partnerships. The very opportunities she had fought for were slipping away. She felt like the walls were closing in. People she had once worked with stopped responding to her messages. Casting agents who had praised her suddenly acted distant. She had seen this happen to others before, the way the industry could turn on someone overnight. She wasn't sure if she could survive it. Then, an even bigger scandal hit. A major publication ran a story suggesting that her success was manufactured, that she had exaggerated her struggles to gain sympathy. They dug into her past, twisting details, making it seem like she had never really struggled at all. The internet exploded with debates, some defending her, others tearing her down. For the first time, she questioned whether she even wanted to fight back. She had worked so hard, yet it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. Every move she made was scrutinized, every word she said twisted. She wondered if it was worth it, if all the sacrifices, all the late nights, all the rejection and persistence had been for nothing. She locked herself away, avoiding calls, ignoring emails. But deep down, she knew she couldn't stay silent forever. She had come too far to let others rewrite her story. She needed to take control, but the risk was enormous. One wrong move, and everything could be over for good. Then, something unexpected happened. Someone from her past reached out, an old mentor, one of the first people who had believed in her when no one else did. They reminded her of who she was before the industry shaped her, before the pressure and expectations made her question her own worth. It was the push she needed. She decided to speak out, but not in the way people expected. She wasn't going to defend herself with arguments or proof. Instead, she would tell her story in her own words, on her own terms. But just as she was preparing to step forward, another twist sent everything spiraling even further out of control. Just as she was preparing to take control of her narrative, a new revelation sent everything spiraling in a way she never expected. An anonymous account surfaced online, claiming to have undeniable proof that her success had been orchestrated from the very beginning. Screenshots, contracts, and insider messages were leaked, suggesting that a powerful figure in the industry had been quietly pulling strings for her. The internet exploded. People who had once defended her now felt betrayed. The accusations painted a picture of someone who had not only manipulated her way to the top, but had also knowingly misled the world about her struggles. She was blindsided. None of it was true, but the details were too convincing for people to ignore. Someone was going to great lengths to ruin her, and she had no idea why. It was bigger than just online rumors. Some of her biggest contracts were put on hold, brands distancing themselves until she could clear her name. Even people she had trusted were hesitant to stand by her, afraid of the damage by association. The mentor, who had encouraged her to tell her truth, now warned her to be careful. There was something deeper at play. This isn't just about public perception, they said. Someone is making sure you don't recover from this. That was when the real fear set in. This wasn't just another scandal. It felt personal, targeted. Someone wanted to erase her from the industry entirely. She retraced every step, trying to figure out who had the most to gain from destroying her. That's when she noticed a pattern. Every person involved in these accusations had ties to a certain agency, one she had turned down early in her career. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. They had offered her a contract that didn't feel right, and she had walked away. Now, looking back, she realized that choice might have made her an enemy she hadn't even known existed. But before she could act on her suspicions, another bombshell dropped. A former associate came forward, claiming that she had paid to bury negative stories about her past. More fabricated evidence surfaced, showing transactions she had never made. It was clear now whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to damage her reputation. They wanted to erase everything she had built. The pressure was suffocating. She could fight back, but the risk was enormous. If she spoke out and failed, she wouldn't just lose her career, she could lose everything. The industry had turned its back on people for less. But if she stayed silent, she was letting them win. As she weighed her next move, she received an anonymous message. It was just a few words, but it changed everything. You were never meant to succeed. Stay quiet, or you'll regret it. The message sent a chill through her. It wasn't just a threat, it was confirmation. Someone powerful wanted her to disappear, and they weren't afraid to make that clear. But instead of fear, something else rose inside her. She had spent too long fighting for her place to let it all be taken away by shadows working behind the scenes. If they thought she would back down, they had underestimated her. She started gathering everything she could: emails, contracts, anything that might expose the truth. She reached out to a journalist she trusted, someone who had built a career on uncovering industry corruption. At first, they were hesitant. The forces at play were bigger than either of them. And if they got this wrong, it could destroy them both. But then, she shared something that changed everything: a recording. She hadn't even realized she had it until she started digging. It was from a meeting months ago, one she had nearly forgotten. A conversation with a representative from the agency she had turned down. The recording captured them subtly warning her that if she refused their offer, it would be difficult for her to make it in the industry. At the time, She had brushed it off as an empty threat. Now, it was proof. The journalist agreed to run the story, but they needed more. So she went further, reaching out to others who had been victims of the same system. At first, no one wanted to talk. Fear kept them silent. But slowly, the truth started coming together. The agency had done this before, targeted rising stars who didn't comply, discrediting them until they disappeared from the spotlight. Just as they were ready to go public, another twist shook everything. A former insider from the agency came forward. Not only did they confirm everything, but they provided hard evidence: emails, documents, messages from executives orchestrating these takedowns. It was bigger than just her story. It was an entire network built on control and silence. The article went live, and the internet exploded. The agency tried to discredit her again, but this time they failed. Too many people came forward with their own stories, and the evidence was undeniable. Within days, major brands severed ties with the agency. Investigations were launched. And for the first time, the people who had worked in the shadows were being exposed. But just when she thought it was over, she received one final message. It was from someone she never expected: a former executive from the agency. It was just a few words, but they sent a shiver through her. "You won this round. But the game isn't over." She stared at the message for a long time. The words carried a weight that sent a shiver through her, but this time, she didn't feel fear. She had already walked through fire and survived. This wasn't a game to her. It was her life, her truth, and no one was going to take that away. The media frenzy didn't die down for weeks. Every major outlet covered the scandal, and more people from the industry came forward with their own experiences. What had started as an attempt to silence her had become something much bigger. The system that had operated in secrecy for so long was now being picked apart, piece by piece. Some of the top executives resigned, others faced legal action, and for the first time, real change seemed possible. But even as the headlines swirled, she knew this wasn't the end of the fight. The industry didn't change overnight. There were still powerful people clinging to their influence, trying to shift the narrative in their favor. They painted her as an opportunist, claiming she had fabricated everything for attention. But she had proof, and the truth was stronger than any smear campaign. Her career, once hanging by a thread, had never been more solid. The brands that had distanced themselves from her before were now scrambling to work with her. Magazines that had once ignored her now wanted her on their covers, not just as a model, but as a voice for change. She was no longer just another face in the industry, she was a force to be reckoned with. Still, it wasn't about revenge. She didn't care about proving her doubters wrong anymore. She cared about the people who had been trapped in the same cycle she had escaped from. So she did something no one expected. She built something of her own. With the support of other creatives who had been pushed aside by the industry, she launched a platform dedicated to giving opportunities to those who had been overlooked. Models, photographers, designers, all the talent that had been dismissed because they didn't fit the industry's mold. She wanted to prove that success didn't have to come at the cost of integrity. And it worked. The platform grew faster than anyone predicted, drawing attention from all over the world. It wasn't just a career move, it was a movement. It gave people a space to be seen, to be valued for their talent, rather than their ability to conform. She had started this journey as someone who had been told she wasn't enough. Now, she was setting the standard. As she stood on the set of her latest shoot, looking around at a team that truly believed in what they were creating, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. Not because the fight was over, but because she had found her purpose. Her phone buzzed with another message, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was from a young model who had just booked her first major job through the platform. "Thank you," it read. "Because of you, I didn't give up." She smiled. That was all the confirmation she needed. The game they had played against her was over, and she had won.